Welcome everybody to the Meshery development meeting. Today is 25th of August. And if you haven't already, please add your names to the attendees list and add any topics you might have to discuss as well to the meeting minutes. Before we get started with today's agenda, is there any newcomer on this call who is joining this call for the first time? Subradev, like, did you get a chance to introduce yourself before?
Yes. In last meeting, I have already introduced myself.
Oh, sounds good. Uh, Anyone else who's new on this call? Shubham Kumar,
Yes.
is this? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I have just joined. I have introduced myself in the Slack room, and I'm a student. I'm a final year BTech student from IIT Mandi in India. Thank you.
Welcome. Welcome to the community. I hope you will be able to learn something new today. We have a long list of topics as well. Uh, Anyone else who'd like to introduce themselves? Oh, I don't think so. Everyone is old people here in the community. All right. Let's get started with today's topic. First up, so basically, I want to point out this document in Meshery Docs, which talks about the design principles that are taken to consideration while building Meshery and the components surrounding to it. So basically, these are a set of guidelines that we expect everyone to follow to make sure that uh, we are following the best practices when we are developing Meshery. So the link to it is in the chat. I won't spend too much time talking about it. You can go through it. So it would be a good exercise to look into it and uh, try to take up those principles or keep those principles in mind when you make your next PR. So it also has specific specific design principles for each of the components as well. So you can look into that as well. Uh, all right. With that, let's move on to
I'll toss in a little bit of color there if I could on that last page in particular. The one I think right now it might only be on Meshery CLI on this particular page that well, no, I guess it's not true. I think we talk about mostly, I think the contributor guides talk about the mechanics of contributing, which is like have Git installed on your system, use this, make that, build this, this sort of, the procedural things by which code or pictures or YAML or whatever you're contributing here or into GitHub is done. The thing is there's a couple other things about this. So this, I'm sorry, there's a couple of other things about contributing that have to do, that are softer than this, that aren't necessarily procedural in nature per se, or they're harder to quantify in a binary way or articulate in a binary way. So some of it becomes, well, touchy-feely or maybe a little subjective, but we try to wrap some guidance around aspects of user experience. User experience ends up being a bit touchy-feely. It's where humans get involved and the code touches the human. And so there's a bit of a style guide for the user experience, at least on the command line, and how we, how the CLI and the interactions that users have should uphold certain principles of consistency or other principles that are articulated here. And so these are, these require a little bit of simmering, if you will, a little bit of percolating. So once you've read them and then you've begun to interact as a user yourself with the CLI in this case, then you begin to reflect on these principles and understand whether or not the current experience is achieving these and whether or not maybe these need to be enhanced. These contributing guides are living documents, much like the software itself is, and much like the rest of the docs are. So it's not like it's off limits to suggest that there's a fifth design principle, or to suggest modification to the existing ones. The thing is like, well, okay, so the CLI is one such client with which users interface with the project. There's another significant client that users use to interface with Meshery. That's the UI here, which is probably, when you think about user experience, that's probably the first thing that pops to mind is like, oh, it's the UI, right? Well, it's also the CLI. It's basically any client. And so I don't think that we have as many, we don't have, if I could get a sentence out, we do not have the same sort of a style guide that characterizes a set of design principles for how it is that, well, a little bit like these design goals, they start to become, they are in essence design principles. So that first one, user experience should be intuitive. Great, that's a great principle to have and to go after. And that very much so is part of the value proposition of Meshery, is that people can go off and use these service meshes onto their own. And so what value is Meshery providing? Well, it can provide a ton of other things on top. One of those things can be the ease by which you understand what the heck a service mesh is doing. And so anyway, my point of adding some color here, and I'll stop in just a second, is to say that there is a softer side to the contributing, and that we're only so far in the journey of articulating those conventions and those style guides. Some of the style guides are easier to capture than others, like a style guide literally being like a color theme or a design or aspects of a design language. Like that's easier to, capture in a spec. And by the way, there are style guides both for layer 5 as a community. There's a brand guide that's in the slide deck in the community drive. And then for mesh, for the 6 different websites, and for Meshery itself, there's a couple of Figma design files, I believe is the right term. Within there, it captures, or they capture, a variety of considerations. And so anyway, with that, as there's currently, I think Navendu and Piyush and some others are probably going through something of an audit of Meshery CTL and its interactions, and how, whether or not we're doing a good job of adhering to these conventions, these style conventions. So it's kind of top of mind, and I think that's why Navendu is making sure to highlight it. So it's a good highlight.
Yes, thank you, Lee. So as Lee mentioned, I highlighted this because of some UX inconsistencies across Meshery CTL. So if you find any inconsistencies, or if you find something unintuitive in Meshery CTL, especially because we want to make sure, like most probably the CLI would be the first thing the user would interact with as they install Meshery. So it is pretty important to make it intuitive. So please raise any bugs if you find these. Right. Moving on to the next topic. Ashish or Rudraksh or anyone else would like to talk about this spec?
So yeah, I can. Yesterday, the thing I showcased in Meshery, that PR is still pending to be merged. The Basically it would not take more than like 15 to 20 minutes to actually write. There is just one single function that is needed to be written in the Meshery adapters, and I wanted to actually ask. There are two ways to do it, and I wanted to go through these two ways, and if Lee can tell me which one is better, because he is in favor of persisting the components as well. So one of the ways is that actually right now there is a function in there's a function in there's a function known as I guess register workload something. Currently it registers the static components that are inside the template directory. Now I was thinking about using that same function to but what that would require is to actually dynamically generate those components to actually store them on file system, then from there open them, and then this is this two-step process. So instead of that, I was thinking more like I can rewrite another function so that these static and dynamic things can be completely separate, so we can choose which functions to invoke at what point. There is no coupling between the two. So I can write another function which is solely responsible for the dynamic generation. It would just fetch the components and just reuse that code that Utkarsh wrote. I would just reuse that bit where he used the exponential backoff to actually hit the Meshery server. So I would just generate the components and send those components to the Meshery server. And then in future, if you want to persist it, we can just add another persister function and spin it up as a go routine and persist it, version it any way we want. So I was thinking to not use the current register function and to write another function so that these two things can be separate, and it would not take. It is just one function. It would not take like more than 15 minutes. So I'm still waiting for that Meshery PR to be merged. So as just like as soon as it would be merged, I will go ahead and make a PR for the Meshery for the Istio adapter.
Boy, just for my part, and others can give feedback as well, as that sounds like a great plan. Hard to pick any bones with that one for me. And I think Soham is going to provide some context as to what it is that Ashish is talking about, pattern components. And so he'll give a link. But anybody else have a dissenting opinion as to what Ashish how he should proceed? Otherwise, we'll move forward. And of course, if there's any dissenting opinions on the call, that would be heresy. So just keep it to yourself. But in all seriousness, yeah, I guess I'll just say it again. Like, great. I mean, part of what Ashish just said, even if you don't know what the heck he's talking about, is he had just said like, hey, rather than overloading one function with two behaviors, he'll create two functions, one for each behavior. One is to do runtime registration. The other one is to persistent registration, if you will. And so that makes a ton of sense. And without explaining further, good. I don't hear anybody suggesting otherwise. So cool. And so Ashish, then looking forward, is any aspect of the runtime generation for pattern components? Right now, it sounds like there's an open PR on Meshery. And by the way, we have a habit in the community of like interrupting ourselves to explain things as we talk about them, because when I say Meshery, I'm not going to explain it, but I'll ask Mr. Meshery maintainer Michael, who wrote a really nice blog post on what Meshery is. He might grab that and share it if he can, because I think in people's minds that could be any number of things. But Ashish, right now the changes are going into Meshkit. Is there any aspect of what you're working on that is intended, that is bound for the Meshery adapter library?
No, as far as I see it, no.
Gotcha. Okay. Alrighty. So next up is, looks like we've got Rudraksh and Shayatan, build time generation for pattern components.
Yeah, so the only update is on this is that we have covered many of the adapters. If you, in the same doc, if you go, I'll share my screen. Yeah. Extra clumsy. This is status on the adapters and where we are in terms of generating components in them. Build time is almost done. Few of the adapters are left. Console traffic and NSM, we'll have to take care of a few things in console. So yeah, I'll have to think about that. And traffic doesn't use CRDs as such. So I guess the configuration here will be mostly based on labels and annotations. And I think that will better be traits. And I don't know about NSL yet. So yeah, that's the update on build time.
At this point, we're not, just quick clarification, we're not leveraging any libraries from Flux at this point, are we?
Nope. In build time, it's just bash scripts, hacky bash scripts, and in runtime, it's Helm libraries for extracting stuff from Helm charts, and yeah, nothing more, just the JSON schema utility.
It's just our optimistic code, probably a little delusional, but yeah, got no Flux. Okay, cool. If you would, between you and Shayatan, perhaps you guys could just do a quick update in that column B or whatever column it was. You don't have to do it now, but
Cool.
thank you. Nice. All right, that's great. Oh, by the way, so on this topic, is Shreyas Mishra on? Might be, might not be. If he's not, someone's going to have to tell him that we talked about him and then give him some FOMO for not being on the call, which is, so he has there's an open pull request from Shreyas on Meshery-Istio, or on the Meshery adapter for Istio. And if memory serves, I don't think this is the biggest pull request that we've seen over the last 1.5 to 2 years that this project has been going on. But it might be, like he is in the running. And so this is our most popular adapter. And soon looks like he'll be one of our bigger contributors, at least measured by number of files committed. So as a point of edification on what we've been talking about for the last 10 minutes about these pattern components and build time generation, runtime generation, and generating delusional things, that what's going on here, and what Shreyas has an open PR on, and I think is ready for merge, I think my finger gets timid when it reaches for the mouse button, just because there's 1,300 files in the PR. And so then my finger gets weak and I don't have the strength to click merge. So Rudraksh, if you could do that, that would be great. That way we can blame you for if anything goes wrong. But the point here is that what's going on, what Shreyas has done is he's in effect with this pull request, he has added Meshery's support for, I don't know, for a long list of versions of Istio. So Istio is, I think, in its 1.10, 1.11-ish range for, of its current release. But, just like any software project, it's had any number of releases starting from, 0.1 to all the way until what it is. And so when people come through, part of, Meshery's task, its responsibility, the cross that it bears as management software, as any management software does, is sustaining and carrying a compatibility matrix, which is to say that Meshery is compatible with 10 different service meshes today. Maybe it'll be an 11th with Nginx soon. Maybe, but how many versions of each of those service meshes does Meshery support? Oh boy, wow, now we're talking about some work. If you go look at commercial products that perform similar tasks, actually two come to mind that perform similar tasks, not the same, but that help you manage Istio and only Istio, and don't try to take on the other service meshes. They only go so far as 3 versions back. And depending upon how they want to phrase it, they might say 4. That's it. And you got to pay for that stuff. So if this works, and I'll just cross my fingers now, then wow, that's impressive. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Hopefully that makes some sense. Somebody will go poke Shreyas and tell him that he missed out on his award for having the largest PR. There he is. Okay, good. It's so much nicer to poke at people when they're here. That's nice. Good. He is. Wait, where's Shreyas hiding?
Shreyas just joined, I guess.
Oh, okay. There you are. All right, good. All right. Well, we're done. Okay, next topic.
All right. Thanks, Lee. Thanks, Ashish and Rudraksh. Moving on to the next topic, Hasna, would you like to talk about the changes in the navigation menu?
Hello, hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So in the PR, can you go to the PR, please? Okay, so the issue was here, there is a navigator on the side menu as a side menu. So when we were collapsing the navigator, all the categories, subcategories under the categories were expanded, and it actually pushes down the chevron menu to the very bottom, and you have to scroll through that. And the task was to make that subcategories under the categories as a non-expanded menu. So
It'll be sorry to interrupt. Actually, it'll be, if we're going to actually talk about this, we're going to actually talk about this and try to work it out. It'll be so much more conducive to doing so if you're able to share an active interface. Otherwise, we'll try to watch the video a bunch of times. And
okay, sure.
Yeah.
So you want me to share the screen?
Please. Yes, please. Always.
Yeah, sure. I guess you guys can see it's all dark. Hello.
Cool. Yep. But the one caveat is you can't do this. Yep. Are you able to bring up the UI? Because otherwise you're just sharing the same thing that Nipendu is sharing. We haven't made it anywhere.
Oh, sure. I was not actually prepared for that. Yeah, sure.
Oh, okay, sure. No problem.
I'm so sorry. It's my first,
Oh yeah,
explaining
no.
things on the meeting, and
Yeah, no, and you're getting.
I wasn't sure what was expected. Yeah.
Totally. I don't sweat it in the least. As a matter of fact, let me here. I've got one here. Do you want to just drive my mouse around and kind of say what you were saying before?
Yeah, sure. Okay, the problem was when we are collapsing the side menu bar, all the subcategories were shown, and which was not expected, and we wanted to hide this under the its parent. So to implement that, we decided to do a hover effect. Like when we are hovering in the collapsed menu bar, all the subcategories will be shown. And after implementing that, we were actually discussing if it should be same like when the menu bar is not collapsed, like in the expanded view, like whenever we are clicking the expand more, we will do the hover effect instead. But as Lee suggested that it should not be done, like it was okay for when it was the menu bar was collapsed, but when it is expanded, I think Lee wasn't not approving the changes to implement the hover effect in an expanded view. So right now we are not sure like how to actually implement the feature of the hover effect.
Yeah. Let me see if I can. Wait, this is kind of a hard one to be concise on.
I built her PR in my local if you guys want to check it out.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, please. So by the way, so here very briefly, I'm going to do this and then we'll switch to Aditya, which is, so today we were just kind of looking at the experience, so there's the whole collapsed kind of issue, but the uncollapsed or the expanded form is just looks like this, and Hasna has already, well, Cypher Girl, dang it, now I can't see it's Hasna, right? Yeah, Hasna. Okay, good. Hasna.
Yeah.
She was already explaining this really
Yeah,
well.
I'm both Hasna and Cypher Girl, both.
Very good. So just for everyone's short-term memory, here's the behavior of what goes on today. Cool. Okay, then over to Aditya.
Yeah, so this is what it's doing right now. Wait. Yeah, so I think like she also made changes to it when the drawer was open, but she hasn't committed that. So right now it's like this, but the behavior would be like it would open up on hover even when it's opened up. So this is what's happening right now. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I mean, yeah. We do probably want for the interactions to be somewhat consistent, that if on hover during collapse, by the way, Hasna, just for a moment, if you don't mind muting there's a feedback loop on your mic, which I think is made. Okay. And then we want to be consistent. Don't make me talk about consistency and quality. But either can potentially work, like on hover, you just expand to let people see what's underneath. I think the bone that I was attempting to pick, but ran out of time late last night to articulate with my fingers, was that in these are the current proposed changes. Boy, that's confusing. These are the proposed changes, right, Aditya?
Yeah.
So if you expand
No,
out,
also like she hasn't committed the ones where even these these expand on hover. So we
Okay.
are planning to do that too.
Right. Yeah. You know what? Actually, I had suggested that we talk about this here. And I kind of think there's 30 of us on the call. It is going to be, it's amazing. There's a lot to talk about in that interaction. And some of you are thinking I'm nuts for saying that. You're nuts. You just hover over the thing and you click the thing. Like what? How could you go on for about 45 minutes on like, and like, it is about a 30-minute discussion where because there's a bunch of scenarios of you're collapsed or you're not. And so you have a bunch of scenarios within those two environments. You're choosing either to auto expand or not to. I think to be concise, the biggest beef that I probably had with the latest proposed changes in the last screen recording on that PR was the fact that we were not only auto expanding, but also auto closing as people navved away. And what happens is people lose their frame of reference. They might open up. Yeah, that's fun, but can you stop for just a moment? So can you navigate to one of those service meshes? And this isn't the latest, but if you were to click on one of these, so you're sitting here, well, what was happening in the latest proposal is that the user would open the accordion, they would choose a mesh, then when they navigate away, it would close on them. And without cookie crumbs or something else, it's kind of like when you walk into a building and the door closes behind you. Oh, that's a bad analogy. It's like you get off the airplane and you get out of the taxi cab and you weren't looking around, you were looking at your phone, you step out of the taxi cab and you're like, fudge, where am I? You're not sure which way is north and which way, like you lose your total frame of reference because what you did was just, you took away the map, you took away the cookie crumb. So that's probably the biggest thing to take a look at in the last proposed thing. We probably need a separate discussion and to facilitate, maybe we'll put a pin in that, but Hasna, if you think about that, I think that'll help us progress.
Hello. Yeah. So what if we can expand, like when we are on the collapsed drawer. So when we click once on any parent item, it will expand the items, and on the second click, it will actually go to the life cycle. So that looks good. Like if you have collapsed menu, then the drawer, then everything will be collapsed initially in the very initial state. Then when we click first on any parent icon, that is dashboard lifecycle or configuration or performance, then it will just expand it for the first time. Then if again any click event occurs on lifecycle, it will just go to the lifecycle URL. Or if the children's are already expanded by clicking once, then any further click on any children item will get back to that URL. Because yeah, that's
Avi, that makes, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, and actually you bring up a good set of discussions around the notion that the parent menu item, sometimes it performs the function of just being a category, and like it itself is not something to click on and navigate to, but it is just organizing submenu items, while other times that parent menu item in fact is navigable itself. And so that becomes confusing. And so that's a whole, and so yeah, we should go write this stuff down because there's a lot, like I was saying, there's like 30 minutes, 40 minutes of like, I'm totally game for that. I just don't want to take.
Yeah, and actually Firebase uses something similar. So Firebase also has drawer, and they also actually use something similar. If I can show you that, like, they have very similar approach to what we are doing. So here's the right. So just like us, this is the collapsible menu. And when we go like when we collapse the drawer, so everything just get expanded, all the icons, everything, and they are separated out by dividers, so we can also take reference from there. So yeah, here is something, and it's collapsible, and when we go back, uh, everything is just expanded, and all the items are divided by a divider, like the horizontal row.
I believe what he was talking about was a different behavior actually. Like if you have Meshery running, there are two separate behaviors on the accordions or drawer components itself. Like one of the drawer components actually takes you to another page, while some other drawer
Yeah.
components does not take you. So I guess we were discussing that.
Okay.
Yeah, so wonderful. I love seeing the references to other prior, pieces of work. That's because many other people have had to sit here and chew through all the same considerations and try to get it right. And maybe they got it just perfect. Maybe we need to augment what they've done, or maybe we need to take anti-inspiration. But my request here is actually, if Hasna, Avi, Aditya, do you mind huddling with Soham and iterating a little bit, and then coming back, not necessarily waiting a week to come back, but
Just to add to that, like what Soham said, that the issue was that like like clicking on lifecycle would take you to a different page, and clicking on the HTML mesh would take you to a different page, right? So that's basically a problem with the routes management that we have, and yeah, that is something that is different from the navigation thing per se. So
But we can just solve it by adding another menu in the
actually,
subcomponent itself, right?
ideally, we would have to rework the way routing is happening in the Meshery, right? Because
No, I
it's
don't think that's required in my opinion. Maybe we can discuss this in the other call that Lee just mentioned, probably.
yeah, we can.
Sounds good. Nitish, your topic is next. Would you like to talk about?
Yeah, sure. So like we actually currently have a problem with the Meshery UI dev server, which is actually listening at localhost 3000, and coincidentally, like Grafana is also listening at localhost 3000. So when you are to run Meshery UI and then Meshery server and then Grafana at the same time, then I mean, like one of either of those, like any one of those two will not be able to run, because one post would already be occupied by either Meshery UI or Grafana. So so I was thinking whether we could change it to a different port, like for the anyways, like we couldn't change the port of Grafana. So I thought we could change the port of the development server to something else, like 3081 something. And actually, this will not have any effect on build version. It's just something. It's just a change in the development server, so we need not think about it much, in my opinion. So anybody have any other suggestions, or like you guys are all okay with this?
one other quick heads up or something to think about is the notion that the provider UI, if the developer so happens to run that separately, which I was last night as I was checking out Barak's stuff, by default, it runs on 3001. And so potential conflict with the 3001, but that brings up another question. Like, do we have a make command that will run both Meshery UI and the provider UI under the same port for development, like a development command?
And the same port, I mean, like those both are different projects in itself, right? So,
but when it's built for production, they both run under same.
yeah, that's actually because they are built and then served by Meshery server, right? So In that case, it's a totally different scenario in that case.
Gotcha. Okay. Yep. I'll write up a couple of message in the public channel about a couple of thoughts. This is great. I think this is
Yeah,
great.
sure.
But by the way, I didn't mean to be the one giving a ton of feedback. Please, anybody else that has thoughts.
All right. Moving on. Thank you, Nitish. So we have a couple of design specs that needs to be reviewed. So we have three that's on the line right now. So Dhruv, do you want to give a quick idea about what the spec is?
Yeah, sure. So this spec is uh, basically related to the. Okay, wait, my screen is not up, and now it is. So yeah, this spec is basically related to the resolvers which we write for the GraphQL subscription. Currently, basically, a sub dynamically updates your data, and currently if we have more than one subs which uses the same trigger to say that we have to update the data, not all of them would be sending the updated data. This design spec basically has a workaround in that, where instead of using channel we will implement something of a broadcasting where every trigger will receive the particular signal to update the data and send it back. So that's a very brief gist of it. If anyone likes, they can read it in detail and give your reviews if you like. And it would be helpful if people over here can review this by today and we can start working on this because I'm being delayed quite a long time. So it would be great if we could pass this a bit earlier. And yeah, that's a small, short, sweet version of it.
Very good. And then just Drew, from my part, I know you've got some updates since last I looked. One request, if you would, I think you've got these answers in the comments. If you please feel empowered to rewrite where the question marks are under the scenarios, to just rewrite it as a statement of truth of like, oh, okay, I guess you did. But maybe if you have, then delete the question mark, like try to make that question mark into a statement or change it to the correct statement, if you would.
Gotcha.
Also, if those scenarios aren't, yeah, no, that's great. Please do.
Oh, thank you, Dhruv. So anyone else have comments on this spec? So the link to this spec is in chat. You can add your comments there and look into it in detail. So the another spec here is to package, basically have seed content for patterns, filters, and applications. So this talks about Meshery being an artifact repository for these service mesh patterns. So when users first start Meshery, they will have some seed content with some sample patterns that they can readily deploy. So this specs talks about that, and this needs a couple of more iterations, I guess. So I will share the link in chat, and you can check it out and add any suggestions you have. And the final spec talks about state management in Meshery UI. Nitish, would you like to give a quick overview of what this spec is?
Yeah, so basically like as like we just yeah, so basically like we have some problems with like currently the state management in Meshery UI, like
React is managing all the states now, and this is not something which would be scalable. Like if we are going to move forward and yeah, so basically like some of the problems related to the state management and caching and all those stuff are being addressed in this proposal, and the proposal is basically to bring in Redux and some other middlewares as well. So if you want to take a deep look into it, you can just go to the proposal and add your views on it as well. So it's kind of in the final stage right now, and we would be pushing to implement this thing, but still we have some unresolved comments and we are working on it right now. Yeah.
Yep. Thank you, Nitish. So the link to this spec is in the chat as well. Any comments on the spec before we move on? Right. Uh, Next up, we have Tanuj. Do you want to talk about the centered theme for Meshery UI?
Yeah, let me just share. Okay, so currently we do have somewhat of a central theme in Meshery, and it currently defines two colors, primary and secondary. And the problem is that according to our requirement, we need this set of primary colors and this set of secondary colors. So what material UI allows us to centrally define is only a single primary color with a lighter version of that and a darker version of that. And we cannot just use them anywhere we want directly. Basically, if you look at this, you just pass on the prop of primary and it automatically takes up this primary color and the lighter color and the darker color. It auto adjusts itself unless we override the CSS, of course. So the uh, the thing is that we need to narrow down the set of to basically a single primary color and a lighter version that Meshery can that it a material UI should automatically take. That's the main problem, and these extra colors we can add them, but they cannot directly be used unless we use them in overwriting the CSS. What we can do is add these type of these headers and they will be automatically overwritten, but not anything our own unless it is overwritten, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you go back to Figma for a moment, there is, and I'm not telling you anything that you don't know, but so there is this set of colors, and then there's also a second set of colors specific to notifications.
Yes.
Okay, and so which works out well with respect to the predefined set of colors for notifications. So that's good. So the existing theme has placeholders for our notification colors. It does not, however, and it has predefined placeholders for up to 2 brand colors, or like other colors, primary and secondary, of which is a little bit limiting. And so, yeah, without, so currently the primary and secondary colors that we have defined inside of our use of the theme, do you know what those 2 are?
Yeah, the first one was this blue gray. It's almost similar to this color, but not exactly, but it, you cannot make out the difference.
Yeah, right. Okay, and then the other one.
Yeah, the one problem with secondary is that this is red and this is black, and we are just using them any way we want, it not basically following any convention.
Right. So, and if we made an attempt to add a tertiary, for example, to the palette, what does that entail? Does that forever break us away from, like, does that entail then going to each component and customizing each component to account for a tertiary color, or what would it?
Yeah, kind of. Let me just, if I can find a button.
By the way, if this is anyone else's area, like forte area, like if anyone else is skilled in theming, or like please sound off in the chat. This is
So most of the components, we directly pass a property called color equals to primary, secondary. And if we try to pass anything else that we define here, uh, let's tertiary, it doesn't take it automatically. So what we need to do, what we have to do then is basically in either create a central component for this button, or in this page we override the CSS here of that button
right.
by importing that theme, of course, but we cannot use them directly.
That's weird. That seems weird to me. Like the string primary and the string secondary. If you were to pass it a string of Disneyland or like tertiary, why is that not variabilized? Like why is that not? I don't know.
I'm not sure. There was an open issue for this in Material UI, but they seem to close that, telling that we only support primary and secondary, and I don't know why they didn't expand it further.
Using this particular component as an example, like if, yeah, I guess if you go to the source component, like the source button component or something that comes from Material UI.
Yes.
Does there, it would seem the weirdest thing that there's hard-coded strings, primary and secondary. Like certainly they're hard-coded into the theme and that's what's defined in the theme. If we take and extend the theme though and add a third color set, the fact that you can't dynamically provide that it doesn't dynamically look that up, that's weird to me. So that color prop, this property type of color, the color component, it supports those theme colors to make sense for this. Yeah, like I don't know, like where does it say? Is there hard coding of primary and secondary in here? Like what?
I'm not sure about that, but I
Or
actually
maybe
tried to use it. Throws an error if it throws a warning if I try to pass in anything else.
any
Telling it to
other.
pass only primary, secondary.
Oh, okay, and is it the area, because it could be the case that they didn't hard code primary and secondary, but what they made consideration for was only up to two named colors, and maybe they allow you to change the name from primary to something else, but you can only have up to two. Maybe that's the limitation. I don't know. It seems horrifically, it feels like wearing handcuffs. Like, it seems unnecessary. We're handcuffed. Is anyone else? Has anybody got the key?
Yeah, actually, I think there might be a reason behind that, because like they are trying to enforce like they're trying to make it like a design language in the sense.
Yeah.
So that might be the reason behind that. But actually, they give us a lot of flexibility over how to customize these components still. So if we are not able to do it that way, then they are providing us some other APIs as well to do that, I think.
So let me.
All right, something to, well, clearly we use other colors, and no doubt we've done the, we've done ourselves, we've done the horrific thing of like just inline styling various components in different ways. And like, it seems like a good, it seems like an open research project. Like, I'm dissatisfied with the perpetual wearing of handcuffs. I don't know if everyone else is. It'll take some work, but it like, I mean, another potential approach, like as a question, if you go back to the theme, so similar to the notification colors that they have, that Material UI defines, it's like, here's success, but success with like 2 or 3 lighter shades of success, or different, like there's the palette.info.light, palette.info.main, palette.info.dark. Can there also be a palette.info.neon?
Yeah, it can be there, but we have to use them in the CSS and not directly pass it as prop in the color. What I mean in the CSS,
Okay, I'm convinced that there's something much more, that there's an intelligent way to systematically achieve this without a lot of code. Like that universally we could make reference to a central theme that is like there's definitely.
Yeah, I feel the same way as well, because like the library being the, like, I mean, like a lot of people are using this library and they wouldn't be using it if not it is capable of doing, like it's not capable of referencing, we're not able to reference the theme from a global level, right?
yeah, we can reference the theme, but like this theme.palette. But we cannot use them in as a prop to a component. That's the problem. We can
Yeah,
override
yeah.
the CSS, but not as a prop that we are currently doing in all the places.
Yeah, I understand.
So, like, what's wrong with using theme.pal.background? Like, we can centralize the color scheme itself in the theme, and then if for primary, secondary, let them be as it is. And if we want to tweak it a bit, we can use the theme specified colors which we already have to change. That makes
Yeah,
sense, right?
yeah, that is possible.
So I missed, would that be centrally governed, or would that just be on a per component basis?
No, that will be centrally governed.
Oh, okay. My pea brain didn't quite comprehend that. That
So,
sounded like a really easy solution to what we were asking. So like that sounds great because it sounded easy and sounded like the solution, but I don't like, why wasn't that suggested, or like what's wrong with that?
No, nothing, there's nothing wrong with that. I the only thing I wanted was that means the prime we when you are using all the things for buttons and all, we just need one color for primary for and a lighter and a darker shade. And if we want all the other colors, we can override the CSS. That's what I'm suggesting.
Oh, okay. Wait, let me regurgitate that back to you. So is it, okay, so understanding that we can have, well, so the accent and let's say that last one was just called black.
Yeah.
Within each of the 4 rows of color, I think you're saying, hey, you can conveniently have up to 2 colors within each group. You can extend it to all of them, but that's gonna, that's gonna make it's gonna be even harder. So conveniently, you could have 2 in each group. And is the limitation the number of groups that you can have? Like,
No, we can have as many groups and as many colors inside it. But while if we are going to use that as a prop to a component, that is color equals to primary or anything else, that then we have to use only one color primary and one color of secondary, and we cannot use others. If we want to use the other colors, then we will have to import that we override the CSS in this way, and this theme dot palette dot accent dot let's say teal blue will be centrally defined, but it won't be passed as a prop to button as simple as color equals to primary. That's what I'm suggesting.
What would it be passed at as?
We will have to in that component we have to it will be like for that button override the CSS as background color equals to theme dot palette dot accent dot teal blue.
I'm convinced. I'm still slightly confused as to how to give the best guidance. I do know that it is okay if we only have one color in each of those groups. If it's convenient enough for us to have 50 groups without having to do a lot of rigmarole, like that's another way of achieving any number of colors that you want. Yeah,
One more question. I don't know the answer of this, but like in material UI, we can define the variation of the color, like blue 200, 300, like darker blue or lighter blue. So when you are custom defining the theme which we already have, it is basically different variation of the same color. So can we define it in an array form? I think that might be a better idea of grouping it. Just asking. I don't know if we can or not.
You mean an array of primary colors, like?
So instead of primary colors, it could be array of, let's say, the Meshery green or something.
Yeah, that can be done. The only drawback I mentioned was that you cannot use that as a prop.
By the way, you just said array of primary colors. So can we implement that too? I
Yeah,
don't think we can.
you can add anything like ABC or anything here. But it's just that it doesn't make any sense to material UI. You can import that and you use that to override the CSS.
Okay, got it.
anybody else have opinions on this? Alman, I just saying your name out loud just in case you have an opinion, or Zane.
Yes, even I have also faced similar issues in the past, because material UI in the code generally prefers only two colors, like primary and secondary. And as he mentioned that in primary, only two extra shades can be given. So we could even do two ways possible. One would be to limit, to change the color variation defined in the Figma file to only two. Like in the primary section, we define only three colors. In the secondary section also, we define only three colors. But if somehow that is not possible, then we would have to write a bit more code in the CSS part to modify the existing components, because natively material UI doesn't support more things as a props, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I think the problem statement is that we have four color groups. There are many shades within those color groups. We probably don't need to use all the shades. That, like, if we were able to achieve four color groups with two colors apiece, that's probably enough. That's a pretty, and centralize that such that it's, we can reference that consistently, and potentially someone can go into their user preferences and select the dark theme That is kind of the problem statement. Yeah. It might be that we should propose one or two approaches and weigh the pros and cons in written form.
Like, yes, if you're talking about the theming part, then yes, in material UI we can have as a drop down we can have multiple theme, like light theme, dark theme, and a medium theme. But in all those themes we can define primary colors differently. Like the for dark theme, primary color might be different, and for light theme it might be different. But in both cases it would be good if we can define only 3 shades of primary colors and 3 shades of secondary colors. So are we open to change those 6-7 colors into 2 or 3?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, like if in our theme we said primary, and then we had pink, and it had the color for the hex code for pink, and then we had yellow and red, and it was like totally messed up and not like random, just like all the like. While that's somewhat perverse and not necessarily maybe the intention that they were going for, it still achieves the goal of not having to write a bunch of extra code, but also being able to reference charcoal, Keppel, and teal blue all in one, like primary dot Keppel, primary dot teal, primary dot black, primary dot charcoal. And then in secondary, it can be so like in primary, it would be primary dot charcoal, and you'd get the leftmost box that says charcoal. Primary dot Keppel would be the leftmost box, like for all 4 of those. And then on the secondary color theme, it might be the square that's just to the right, or something like that. Like that's like 8 colors. That's quite a bit, and that's, you know.
But the approach that you suggested is possible, but then again, you will have to override the CSS in that manner, because it has to be either there has to be a primary color, single primary color, and a shade of light and a dark, and this light and dark, it automatically picks up, and we cannot just pass it as a prop, like primary dot yellow. We cannot pass this as a prop.
Okay, cool. I'll withhold. We're over time, and it sounds like there's not a readily. Yeah, can you guys do this? Do you mind just writing down, making the best proposal that you think that you can to achieve 2 things? It sounds like the ability to allow a user to switch between themes is pretty routine, and that's fairly, you know. But then the second proposal is like, hey, here's how many colors we think that we could get to. And it's okay if we can't get to in an easy way. Like, it's okay if we only get to 1 of each of those 4 groups, or 2 of each of those 4 groups.
Okay.
Yeah, if you would. I mean, I'm having a hard time. I'm looking for someone else to step up firmly and say this is the right way, because in this case, I don't know. Beautiful. Well, we're over time. Any other topics that were urgent today? Rudraksh, sounds like you were going to go get potentially busy on the Nginx adapter. And if you would, I think, near as I can tell, Jared is, well, he said it a few times now. He's like, hey, put me to work, which that's always, so do it.
So the draft PR is up. It takes care of installing it using Helm. I'm just facing a weird error and troubleshooting it with Mr. Pro right now. So
it should be done. And after that, further capabilities like patterns and all will come in a later PR.
Nice. Cool. Anything else that we have today? Great. Nice. It was very nice to talk to you all. Nivendu, bring us home.
Yep. Thank you for joining everyone and staying so late. We'll see you tomorrow or Friday or next week. Bye.
Thank you, Nivendu.
Yep.
Thanks all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.